Florence, 1513. Niccolò Machiavelli sits in exile, stripped of his position, tortured by the Medici family he once served. He writes by candlelight in a farmhouse outside the city walls. The man who spent 14 years advising rulers now has nothing. No army, no treasury, no friends in power. But he has something more dangerous than any of those. He has seen the machinery. He watched virtuous men lose everything while ruthless operators seized cities. He documented which princes survived and which were butchered in their sleep. He mapped the actual mechanics of political survival, not the fantasy version taught in churches and universities. And what he discovered destroyed the most expensive lie in Western civilization, that goodness translates to power. It doesn't. History is a graveyard of honorable men who played by rules their enemies never acknowledged. Marcus Junius Brutus, the noblest Roman, died screaming in a field after Caesar's assassination backfired. Tsar Nicholas II, a devoted family man, was executed in a basement with his children because he confused decency with strategic competence. Salvador Allende, the democratically elected idealist, chose suicide over compromise as tanks surrounded his palace. Meanwhile, their opposites thrived. Augustus ruled for 41 years by murdering rivals and lying to the Senate. Catherine de' Medici orchestrated the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre and controlled France for 3 decades. Lee Kuan Yew built Singapore into a first-world nation through authoritarian precision and zero tolerance for dissent. This isn't an endorsement of cruelty. It's a recognition of structure. Power operates by rules that have nothing to do with fairness and everything to do with positioning, perception, and the willingness to act when good men hesitate. Machiavelli didn't invent these rules. He simply wrote them down after watching Florence devour itself. You're about to learn what he saw, not because you're cruel, but because refusing to understand power doesn't make you virtuous. It makes you a victim of people who do understand it. This isn't philosophy. It's an operating manual for a game you're already playing, whether you admit it or not. If you've been outmaneuvered by people who smiled while destroying you, if you're exhausted by the gap between what people say and what they actually do, then this framework will recalibrate everything. Subscribe now, and because this channel doesn't traffic in motivational fantasies. We study the architecture of dominance, and if you stay until the end, you'll understand why good men don't win power, and what to do about it if you actually want to operate at the highest levels. Phase 1. Framework. The 8 Machiavellian Doctrines. Doctrine 1. Morality is not a strategy. It's a luxury of the secure human beings construct moral systems to stabilize societies, not to win competitions. Morality is a post-victory framework. It emerges after someone has already secured dominance and now needs a story to justify their position and prevent chaos. The powerful don't reject morality. They define it. The psychological trap is believing that virtue precedes power, when historically it's always been the reverse. You earn the right to be generous after you've secured your position, not before. Acting morally when you lack leverage isn't righteousness, it's strategic suicide. Otto von Bismarck unified Germany through 3 calculated wars, political manipulation, and the deliberate engineering of crises. He provoked Austria and France into conflicts that allowed Prussia to appear defensive while expanding territorially. He forged alliances he knew he'd break. He lied to parliaments and monarchs. Once Germany was unified and he controlled the continent's balance of power, Bismarck became a statesman. He preached peace, built welfare systems, and positioned himself as Europe's diplomatic anchor. His morality arrived after his dominance, not before. Had he led with ethical transparency during the unification wars, Prussia would have remained fractured and irrelevant. In corporate environments, the person who refuses to take credit for collaborative work, who avoids office politics, who believes meritocracy will naturally reward them, that person gets managed out or bypassed. Meanwhile, the colleague who controls information flow, who positions themselves as indispensable to senior leadership, who understand that visibility matters more than contribution, that person gets promoted. This isn't about being evil. It's about recognizing that organizational hierarchies reward strategic behavior, not passive competence. Stop advertising your limitations. Stop preemptively admitting what you don't know in meetings. Stop waiting for permission to take ownership of high-visibility projects. Instead, identify the 3 projects your leadership actually cares about. Attach yourself to them. Communicate your involvement upward before presenting downward. Make yourself synonymous with outcomes, leadership, values. If you ignore this, you will remain competent but powerless. Your work will be absorbed into someone else's narrative. You'll spend your career wondering why effort didn't translate to advancement. If you apply this, you shift from executioner to architect. You stop being the person who does the work and become the person who controls how the work is perceived. Doctrine 2, visibility without vulnerability, is the only sustainable position. Power requires recognition, but exposure invites attack. The optimal position is one where your influence is undeniable, but your methods are obscured. This is why kingmakers outlast kings. This is why intelligence chiefs survive regime changes while presidents are overthrown. Proximity to power without the spotlight's full glare creates durability. Cardinal Richelieu controlled France for 18 years as Louis XIII's chief minister. He structured his influence so that every major decision passed through him. But the king took public credit and public risk. When policies succeeded, Louis appeared strong. When they failed, Richelieu absorbed the operational blame, but never the political cost, because he was seen as the king's instrument, not the source. Richelieu outlasted every rival because he understood that the most dangerous position is the throne itself. The second most powerful position, chief advisor with operational control, was far more secure. In any organization, the person who loudly takes credit becomes a target. The person who remains invisible contributes nothing. The optimal position is the one where leadership knows you're essential, but your peers don't fully understand your leverage. This applies to projects, relationships, and networks. Be the person people consult before decisions are finalized, not the person who announces decisions publicly. Build a reputation as a connector and problem solver within leadership circles, but avoid taking public credit for ideas in large forums. When you contribute a strategic insight, deliver it privately to the decision maker before the meeting. Let them present it. You've now created debt without exposure. Track your behind-the-scenes contributions in a private record. Use it during performance reviews when visibility matters, but never in group settings where it invites rivalry. If you ignore this, you'll either remain invisible and unrewarded, or you'll become visible and resented. Both outcomes end your ascent. If you apply this, you create a position where leadership depends on you, but competitors don't see you as a threat until you've already consolidated influence. Doctrine 3. Loyalty is transactional. Pretending otherwise is weakness. Humans are not tribally loyal by nature. We're conditionally cooperative. We align with entities that serve our interests and abandon them when they don't. The dangerous delusion is believing that loyalty is a virtue in itself. It's not. Loyalty is a contract. When one side stops delivering value, the contract is void, whether it's explicitly acknowledged or not. Marcus Licinius Crassus, the richest man in Rome, funded Julius Caesar's early political career. He gave Caesar the resources to build a base, expecting reciprocal support in the Senate. Caesar took the money, built his legions, and then allied with Pompey, Crassus's rival, when it became strategically advantageous. Crassus died in Parthia, abandoned by the man he'd elevated. Caesar wasn't disloyal, he was strategic. Crassus's usefulness had expired. Caesar's ascent required different alliances. Your employer is not your family. Your manager is not your mentor, unless mentoring you serves their interests. Your colleagues are not your friends, unless the friendship survives a resource conflict. The people who treat professional relationships as sacred are the ones who get blindsided during layoffs, reorganizations, and power shifts. Audit your professional relationships quarterly. I ask, if this person's incentives changed tomorrow, would they still support me? Build alliances based on mutual benefit, not affection. When someone helps you, identify what they gain from the relationship. If the answer is nothing, the relationship is unstable. Prepare exit strategies for every critical dependency. Have alternative sponsors. Have alternative teams. Have alternative skill sets that transfer across contexts. If you ignore this, you'll be shocked when organizations restructure and your loyal supporters don't protect you. You'll feel betrayed, but you are simply operating under a false model. If you apply this, you'll never be surprised by defection because you've already built redundancy into your positioning. You'll move through power shifts unscathed because you never depended on anyone's permanent loyalty. Doctrine 4. Competence without political awareness is servitude. Organizations don't reward competence. They reward competence that serves the priorities of the people who control resources. The most skilled individual contributor, the most knowledgeable technical expert, the hardest worker. These people are valuable, but they're not powerful. Power accrues to those who understand what leadership actually cares about and position themselves as the solution. Georgy Zhukov was the Soviet Union's most successful military commander. He saved Moscow, broke the siege of Leningrad, and led the assault on Berlin. He won more decisive battles than any general in World War II. Stalin marginalized him after the war. Zhukov was too competent, too popular, and too naive about political positioning. He believed military success would protect him. It didn't. Stalin sent him to irrelevant regional commands and ensured he never accumulated political capital. Zhukov survived only because Stalin died before ordering his execution. Competence without political intelligence is a liability to power, not an asset. If you're the person who solves every technical problem, but never attends leadership strategy meetings, you're infrastructure, not leadership material. If you're the person who works 80-hour weeks, but doesn't understand what the executive team is optimizing for, you're a resource, not a decision maker. Spend 20% of your time understanding the political landscape. Who has budget authority? Who's in favor? Who's vulnerable? What leadership is being measured on? Reframe your work in terms of leadership priorities. If your executive team cares about market expansion, don't pitch efficiency improvements. Pitch how your efficiency work enables expansion. Build relationships laterally with people in departments that control resources or access to leadership, finance, strategy, executive operations. These are leverage points. If you ignore this, you'll remain competent and replaceable. You'll watch less skilled operators get promoted because they understood the game you refuse to acknowledge. If you apply this, your competence becomes a force multiplier for your political positioning. You're no longer just good at your job. You're good at making leadership look good, which is the only competence that actually matters. Doctrine 5. Strategic opacity protects you. Transparency is for the secure information. Asymmetry is power. The moment you reveal your full strategy, constraints, or intentions, you've given competitors the ability to neutralize you. The modern obsession with transparency and authenticity is a luxury belief. It works in high-trust, low-stakes environments. In competitive hierarchies, it's strategic malpractice. Tokugawa Ieyasu spent 20 years as a vassal to more powerful warlords during Japan's Sengoku period. He never revealed his full strength. He accepted subordinate positions. He feigned loyalty to shifting coalitions. When the final power vacuum emerged after Toyotomi Hideyoshi's death, Ieyasu moved decisively. He'd been underestimated for decades. His rivals didn't realize he'd been building alliances, stockpiling resources, and positioning troops until it was too late. He won the Battle of Sekigahara and established a shogunate that lasted 250 years because he never showed his hand until the moment required total commitment. In negotiations, the person who reveals their constraints first loses. In job searches, the candidate who discloses their current salary first loses leverage. In project planning, the team that shares detailed timelines before securing resources loses flexibility. Stop explaining your reasoning in detail during decision-making processes. Provide conclusions and framing, but keep your analysis and methodology opaque until you've secured buy-in. When asked about your career goals, your capacity, or your constraints, give directionally accurate but strategically vague answers. Build optionality before communicating decisions. Don't announce you're considering leaving until you have an offer. Don't announce you're pursuing a promotion until you've secured sponsorship. If you ignore this, you'll be outmaneuvered by people who understand you better than you understand them. You'll negotiate against yourself. You'll lose competitions to opponents who had perfect information about your position. If you apply this, you'll operate with an intelligence advantage. You'll move through political environments without leaving exploitable patterns. You'll be harder to counter because your opponents never have full visibility into your positioning. Doctrine 6. Conflict is inevitable. Delay is not strategy. It's cowardice. Avoidance of conflict doesn't prevent conflict. It guarantees you'll fight on someone else's timeline from a weaker position with fewer options. The people who dominate hierarchies understand that conflict is a constant. The only question is whether you engage proactively or reactively. Neville Chamberlain returned from Munich in 1938, announcing peace for our time. After appeasing Hitler's annexation of Czechoslovakia, he believed delaying confrontation would prevent war. It didn't. It gave Nazi Germany 18 months to rearm, expand industrial capacity, and secure strategic resources. When war came, Britain fought from a significantly weaker position than it would have in 1938. Winston Churchill, who opposed appeasement, understood that the worst time to fight is when your enemy has chosen the moment. The second worst time is after you've exhausted all alternatives and lost leverage. The best time is when you still have optionality. Whoa, the colleague undermining you in meetings won't stop because you ignore them. The manager taking credit for your work won't develop a conscience. The organizational dysfunction crushing your team won't resolve itself. Conflict avoidance is a status quo preservation strategy. If the status quo is eroding your position, avoidance accelerates your decline. Identify the one unresolved conflict that's costing you the most: credibility, resources, or positioning. Address it in the next 2 weeks. Not emotionally, not publicly, but directly and strategically. Frame the conversation around outcomes. This pattern is creating X problem. I'm proposing Y solution. If we don't resolve it, Z consequence follows. Document the conversation. If the pattern continues, escalate with evidence. If you ignore this, you'll remain reactive. You'll fight battles when you're already losing. You'll watch your position erode until you're forced to act from desperation, which guarantees poor tactical choices. If you apply this, you'll shift from victim to operator. You'll engage conflicts when you have leverage, support, and options. You'll stop losing ground by default. Doctrine 7. Reputation is architecture. Build it before you need it. Reputation is the most durable form of power because it operates independently of your presence. It precedes you into rooms. It shapes how your actions are interpreted. It determines whether people give you the benefit of the doubt or assume the worst. Most people treat reputation as an outcome of their work. It's not. It's a construction project that requires deliberate design. Frederick the Great inherited a second-tier kingdom in 1740. Prussia was militarily insignificant compared to Austria, France, and Russia. Frederick spent his early reign building a reputation for military genius through a series of small, decisive victories. He cultivated an image as a philosopher king who couldn't be intimidated. He wrote treatises on strategy and corresponded with Voltaire. When larger powers threatened Prussia, they hesitated, not because of Prussia's actual strength, but because Frederick's reputation made the cost of confrontation uncertain. His constructed image of invincibility created deterrence that his military capacity alone couldn't. If you're unknown within your organization until you need political capital, you've already lost. If people's first impression of you is formed during a crisis, you have no control over the narrative. Identify 3 strategic qualities you want to be known for: execution speed, creative problem solving, stakeholder management, etc. Actively create evidence for these qualities in low-stakes situations. Volunteer for visible projects that demonstrate them. Share case studies in internal communications. Build a pattern. Connect with stakeholders before you need their support. Take interest meetings with leaders in adjacent departments. Offer value before making asks. If you ignore this, your reputation will be passively constructed by others based on incomplete information and political bias. You'll be defined by your worst moment, not your consistent performance. If you apply this, you'll enter high-stakes situations with credibility already established. When you need support, people will already have a framework for understanding your value. Doctrine 8. Power is amoral. Your relationship to it determines whether you're used or using. Power is a force like gravity. It doesn't care about your intentions. It flows toward people who understand its mechanics and away from people who pretend it doesn't exist. The moralistic rejection of power doesn't make you virtuous. It makes you a resource for people who have no such qualms. Maximilien Robespierre entered the French Revolution as an idealist. He opposed the death penalty. He advocated for universal suffrage and the abolition of slavery. He believed virtue could govern a society. Within 3 years, he was orchestrating the terror, sending thousands to the guillotine, including his former allies. His idealism didn't protect him from power's logic. It made him more dangerous because he believed his brutality was righteous. He was executed by the same mechanisms he'd created, betrayed by colleagues who understood that moral certainty is a liability in political competition. The lesson isn't that idealism is wrong. It's that idealism without strategic competence becomes tyranny or victimhood, never sustainable reform. The people who refuse to engage with organizational politics don't stop politics from happening. They just ensure they have no influence over the outcome. The person who moralizes about merit while ignoring visibility, alliances, and positioning will watch less qualified operators advance, then blame the system for corruption. Stop framing career strategy as selling out or playing games. Reframe it as operational competence. Study the people in your organization who have disproportionate influence. What behaviors do they share? What mistakes do they avoid? What relationships do they prioritize? Adopt the tactics that don't violate your actual ethical boundaries, which are narrower than you think. Most strategic behavior isn't unethical. It's just uncomfortable for people who've been socialized to be passive. If you ignore this, you'll remain ideologically pure and structurally powerless. You'll watch cynics and operators shape the systems you work within, then complain about the outcome. If you apply this, you'll stop being shaped by power dynamics and start shaping them. You'll recognize that the alternative to engaging with power isn't virtue, it's irrelevance. Phase 2. Inner work. The psychological recalibration. The doctrines above are useless without internal transformation. Most people fail to operationalize Machiavellian strategy, not because they lack intelligence, but because they lack emotional sovereignty. They're still operating under childhood conditioning that equates power-seeking with immorality, that confuses aggression with strength, that treats discomfort as a signal to retreat. Here's the inner work required. 1. Separate morality from strategy. You can be ethical and strategic, but you cannot be naive and effective. Your ethics should define what you won't do, not whether you'll act at all. 2. Eliminate shame around self-interest. You're not noble for sacrificing your positioning to make others comfortable. You're just poorly calibrated. Strategic self-interest enables you to help others from a position of strength, not resentment. 3. Develop emotional detachment from outcomes. Stoic principles apply here. You control your actions, not results. Operate with full commitment, but zero attachment to whether people like you for it. Approval seeking is the fastest way to lose respect. 4. Accept that you're already in competition. The choice isn't whether to compete. It's whether to compete effectively or be consumed by people who do. 5. Build tolerance for strategic discomfort. Every doctrine above will feel wrong the first time you apply it. That discomfort is social conditioning, not moral intuition. Push through it. Calibrate based on results, not feelings. Phase 3. Protocol. The 30-day implementation path. You now understand the framework. Here's how to operationalize it immediately. Week 1. Intelligence gathering. Map your organizational landscape. Identify who controls resources, who's rising, who's falling. Document decision-making patterns. Build a political map. Week 2. Positioning audit. Evaluate your current visibility, alliances, and leverage. Where are you overexposed? Where are you invisible? Where are you dependent on single points of failure? Week 3. Strategic engagement. Execute one doctrine per day. Take credit strategically. Build a relationship with someone in a leverage position. Address one avoided conflict. Create evidence for your target reputation. Week 4. Consolidation. Review what worked. Double down on high-return behaviors. Eliminate activities that generate effort without positioning value. Build systems to maintain strategic awareness ongoing. This isn't a one-time shift. It's a permanent operating posture. Here's what you need to understand. Machiavelli didn't write The Prince to create monsters. He wrote it to expose the machinery so competent people could stop being crushed by it. The world is full of people who've read this and done nothing. They'll watch this video, feel momentarily awakened, and return to the same passive patterns that have kept them stuck. They'll tell themselves they're too ethical for strategic thinking, which is just a rationalization for cowardice. Don't be them. The people who win aren't smarter than you. They're not more talented. They're just willing to see power clearly and act accordingly. If you've made it this far, you're already different. You're capable of the intellectual honesty required to operate at higher levels. Now prove it. Subscribe to this channel if you want to continue studying the architecture of dominance. Like this video if it shifted your operational framework. Comment with the one doctrine you're implementing first. Hold yourself accountable publicly. And remember Machiavelli's actual lesson, the one that gets lost in the mythology. Good men don't win power by accident. They win it by understanding the game better than their enemies and refusing to apologize for playing it well. Now, go build your position.